Throughout the history of the world, there are good guys and bad guys. The settling of the American West was no different. Often identified as a hero, Wyatt Earp has gone down in history and citing the greatest example of American frontier justice that we know today. Amidst all his idyllic stories is a man with a deep moral gray area, who is simply trying to make his way in the world. Throughout his life, Wyatt was a well-known lawman, beginning in Wichita and then to Dodge City, Kansas. These two towns were the best-known start to his career upholding the law. In Dodge City, Wyatt kept the peace as an assistant marshal and was eventually promoted to deputy U.S. Marshal. This is where Wyatt and Doc Holliday met, but we'll talk about Doc later. Wyatt had a knack for the job, and as much as he tried to get out of it, he always seemed to circle back to lawing. So what exactly is Wyatt Earp known for? Modern media has made him a hero, retelling the story of the gunfight at the OK Corral over and over. In 1879, Wyatt received a letter from his older brother Virgil, a well-respected lawman in his own right. Virgil had been recently elected town constable of Tombstone, Arizona, and was soon to be elected deputy U.S. Marshal. Tombstone was in the middle of a silver boom, and Wyatt, his younger brother Morgan, and his friend Doc headed west to catch some of the action. Wyatt's intentions were to start a stagecoach line, but he was too late, as there were already two well-established companies upon arrival. So Wyatt and his brothers bought some land and mining rights, and Wyatt got himself a job as a shotgun messenger for Wells Fargo, basically the armed guard of the safe. Once again, he was doing the job as a lawman, just in the private sector. Tombstone's first few years saw immense growth, and with it came more conflicts between the outlaw crime syndicate, the Cowboys, and the Republican business owners of the town. Virgil occasionally appointed Wyatt and Morgan deputy town marshals, and the Cowboys opposed the Earps as law-enforcing tyrants that were in conflict with their own interests. Things were heating up between the Earps and the Cowboys, and it was leading to the gunfight at the OK Corral. This is arguably one of the most famous things the Earps are known for. The basic rundown of the event goes like this. Arguments and false accusations of theft between the Earps, Doc Holliday, and the Cowboys, namely Ike Clanton and the McLaury brothers, begin to fly from both sides. Death threats to the Earps are becoming more common amongst the Cowboys. Doc Holliday and Ike Clanton get into a drunken argument one night, which Virgil has to break up, and wherein Ike famously states, "You must not think I won't be after you all in the morning," to Wyatt. The next day, citizens reported to Virgil that Ike Clanton and the McLaury brothers, along with a few other cowboys, had entered town while armed. This was against the law at the time. Virgil decides it is time to disarm them. Virgil and his brothers Morgan and Wyatt, along with Doc, who got the privilege of being a temporary deputy, walked down to the corral to face the Cowboys. The gunfight was only 30 seconds. The two McLaury brothers and Ike Clanton's brother Billy were killed. Ike Clanton, the man who bragged and threatened to kill the Earps, ran forward once the shooting had begun, claiming that he was unarmed and did not want to fight. Wyatt's response to this was, "Go to fighting or get away." Virgil, Morgan, and Doc were injured, but Wyatt was untouched. This event and the event that followed are what people think of when they hear the name Wyatt Earp, but let's jump back a bit and talk about the anti-hero events that also shaped Wyatt's life. In 1870, Wyatt married his first wife, Urilla, who unfortunately died later that same year. After his young wife died, Wyatt fell into some trouble and was accused of stealing 2 horses. He was arrested with a $500 bail. It's a common belief that sometime during the night, Wyatt escaped through the roof of the jail and headed to Peoria, Illinois. He was never taken to trial for his horse theft. In Peoria, Wyatt met his younger brother Morgan. While there, he was arrested 3 times, and all were associated with brothels. Him and Morgan were issued fines after their first arrest at a low price that was common for clients. The second time, the fines were much higher, indicating that Wyatt was working for the brothel. This was backed by the fact that Wyatt's listed address was the same as a popular brothel of the area. Some historians believe he was nothing more than a doorman. Others argue that Wyatt Earp was a pimp. Wyatt was personally interviewed by Stuart Lake before he died. Lake wrote a biography on Earp that was published in 1931. It is now known to be highly sensationalized and basically tells a tale of a Western superhero. During that year, Wyatt told Stuart Lake he was buffalo hunting, and while it is a possibility, the actual police records indicate more. After the events in Peoria, while Wyatt was in Dodge City, he met Doc Holliday. Wyatt claimed Doc saved his life. The story goes that Wyatt burst into the Long Branch saloon to settle some commotion, only to have multiple guns pointed at him. Doc, who was apparently playing cards at the back of the room, pointed his own gun at the ringleader's head and made his men back down. Now, Doc Holliday was a man of questionable character. Diagnosed with tuberculosis, he moved to the Southwest hoping the warm and dry air would help his symptoms. A trained dentist by trade, Doc turned to a life of gambling and drinking. He held a reputation of being deadly with his gun, although the true count of how many people he killed is often disputed. Wyatt, an unquestionably loyal man to the law, was often criticized for his reasons of hanging out with Doc. Finally, what is possibly the biggest moment against Wyatt's character is also one of the most known. After the gunfight at the OK Corral, the cowboys took their revenge against the Earp brothers. Virgil Earp was shot and was crippled and never able to use one of his arms again. Sometime after that, Morgan Earp was fatally wounded while playing billiards. Virgil decided to leave Tombstone, and after another failed assassination attempt on Virgil's life, Wyatt took the law into his own hands. He deputized a group of men to help him, Doc Holliday among them, in an effort to pass off his own vengeance as legal. Wyatt had little faith in the court system, having been failed by it several times in the past. His group of men hunted out the cowboys, eventually killing 4 men in a final showdown. Wyatt himself left the scene with only bullet holes through his coat. Wyatt's posse dispersed and were never charged. Everything about these last actions were in opposition to what he had believed and upheld as a lawman. Although they had warrants for the arrest of 5 cowboys, Wyatt's posse killed 4 of these men on what is known as the Earp Vendetta Ride. It is seen as the greatest example of American frontier justice. And while Earp is often symbolized as a hero in this, it is also a great example of simple revenge. Whether Wyatt was a hero or not is often discussed among historians, but regardless, he was just a guy living his own life, making his own story full of cowboys, gunfights, and justice.